On our last day here of the Creative Aging Institute, for all of these reasons, it's only appropriate that we showcase and celebrate the work of state arts agencies. They have done a tremendous job contributing to making sure that all Americans, including older adults, can access high quality, life affirming, socially connecting arts learning programs. So, in our first panel, I have the absolute pleasure of mentioning that we're going to hear from our partners at Lifetime Arts as well, who are working hand in hand with state arts agencies to do this work with excellence and visionary leadership. You can always learn more about Lifetime Arts and all of our presenters in our speaker biographies package. So without further ado, please welcome Nathan Majoros, Director of Programs at Lifetime Arts, Josh Chrysler, folklorist and health and wellness specialist at the Wyoming Arts Council, Monica Grable, Arts Education Director at Montana Arts Council, Tony Manfredi, Executive Director of Nevada Arts Council, and Laura Rogar, Arts Learning Services Director at Idaho Commission on the Arts. Nathan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Susan, and welcome everybody. Just confirm everyone can see the slide up there?
Looks good.
Great, thank you everybody. So welcome again. I must say the past 2 days of this Creative Aging Institute has been really exciting and energizing. And so it's really an honor to be here today with all of you in this space. And a big thanks to Susan and NASA for holding this event over these past 3 days. So hi, I'm Nathan Majoros. I'm the Director of Programs at Lifetime Arts. And I'm really excited to join you today to share information about a recent project of Lifetime Arts called Advancing Creative Aging in Western States. And I'm also really stoked to facilitate this discussion between our project partners to learn more about how together we've been scaling creative aging work, specifically through state level partnerships. So really quick, just an agenda for today. We're in the welcomes and introductions, but then I'll go into some background and context about this initiative, the Advancing Creative Aging in Western States project. Following that, we're going to hear from our partners at state arts agencies and specifically about their creative aging efforts in each of their states. But then we'll have a roundtable discussion, and that will also flow into a Q&A for us to just talk about the things that are happening. With that, during this presentation and during the panel conversation, I encourage you to throw any questions that you have into the chat, and we'll compile them during the roundtable and have a hopefully lively Q&A session. I'm also incredibly grateful to be joined today by Josh Chrysler, Monica Grable, Tony Manfredi, and Laura Rogar. There are state arts agency partners in Advancing Creative Aging in Western States, this initiative, and they're here to share their unique experiences and specifically their expertise and how they've been building partnerships and buy-in around this creative aging work in their states. And hopefully as a model for us to all look at. I will note, unfortunately, our partners from Utah could not join us today, but I will be sharing some of the updates from them on their behalf. So a bit about Lifetime Arts. We were established in 2008 as a national service organization to help develop an infrastructure for the emerging field of creative aging. And our aim is to help community-based organizations break down silos and build partnerships to deliver engaging, participatory programs that recognize older adults as creative and social learners. And that really is our focus, and it's on sequential skill-building arts engagements, and we're really looking as older adults as learners, and also as aging as a continued opportunity for growth. We provide training and professional development, as well as online resources, technical assistance, and consulting services to give folks the nuts and bolts of creating and sustaining these types of high-quality programs. Lifetime Arts works to seed and launch creative aging initiatives through systems that ideally have the infrastructure to support programs and make them fully accessible to older adults in their community. And to this end, we work with all kinds of sectors: public libraries, arts and cultural organizations, teaching artists, veteran services, and senior service organizations. Uh, Lifetime Arts was actually first founded with a library project in Westchester, New York, in a library system there. And then we've gone on to work with city and state library systems across the country. We often shout out libraries because they are age neutral and accessible across urban, suburban, and rural communities. And libraries are a perfect place to support sequential arts programming for older adults. We find that some sectors, such as senior living communities or veterans homes, are used to more one-off approach for arts engagement, which is still beneficial. And once they see the sequential model in action, however, they note the benefits not only for their folks they serve, but for staff as well. Through our work, we found that even for arts organizations and museums, creative aging is a new approach. So few are serving older adults with programs intentionally designed for their learning needs. And too often, when folks think about arts education, they think only about the K through 12 model. And we've seen this is where arts funders tend to invest as well, with the idea of funding upstream. At Lifetime Arts, we believe we should all have access to arts education throughout our lifetimes so we can all live healthier, more robust lives. So now I'm going to share just a little bit about this initiative. And the Advancing Creative Aging in Western States is a collaboration between Lifetime Arts and 5 Western states: Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. This initiative builds upon the success of these states' participation in NASA's creative aging initiatives and these states' overall creative aging efforts. The overarching goal for this initiative is to establish and strengthen creative aging partnerships within these Western states in order to more effectively serve the region's older adults. This includes sub-goals for each state to build the capacity of states, agencies, staff to collaborate across agencies and with other partners, both within states and within sectors across the states. To leverage, grow, and sustain successful cross-sector state agency partnerships that have been developed through previous creative aging initiatives, and to seed creative aging programs in sector-specific community host organizations in order to demonstrate their benefits and efficacy. And for Lifetime Arts, we also see this as an opportunity to continue to learn about states' needs in order to grow capacity for creative aging, so as to determine next steps to support further growth in the region. Support for this project is made possible through the May and Stanley Smith Charitable Trust. And this project was designed with the following components: consultation with us, Lifetime Arts, as we see the value of collective vision planning in order to help support the cultivation of intentional and purposeful partnerships. Seed funding, which we found to be just this incredible opportunity to both test out new ideas, partnerships, but also to learn from, and then a tool to demonstrate the efficacy of the work. And we found that this really helps develop buy-in. People need to see the work to understand it, to get excited and invested in it. But also shared learning through sector-specific webinar and case studies. And in this initiative, states are forging new partnerships with new sectors, and hopefully there'll be cross-pollination and sharing of the successes and challenges for us to all to learn and grow from. But finally, as a sort of capstone to this project, are statewide creative aging convenings in each of the partnering states. Our hopes for the convenings are to increase collaboration and partnerships that lead to additional resources, capacity, and investment for the work. This really is sort of building a movement of creative aging. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of cross-sector partnerships, and state-level cross-sector partnerships are helping to leverage new funding and support to creative aging across the country, resulting in expanded older adult programming that is responsive, builds artistic skills, increases social connection, and improves health. These state-level cross-sector partnerships are increasing investment in creative aging, building capacity, of state and local agencies to expand access, and more equitably supporting programming in rural areas. This approach to increasing engagement and investment in creative aging has proven successful for supporting rural and other underserved communities in particular, helping to place arts learning at the core of older adult programming in the state. There is a focus of this initiative about creating sustainable systems to support this kind of continued engagement in the arts. And these partnerships are key to altering the culture and systems towards coordinated lifetime learning programs. So with all that, we're going to hear a little bit more about each state and the current creative agent work and hear directly from them about how they're approaching this work. And you also hear Lifetime Arts has been supporting these states' work both in this initiative currently and also through previous engagements, mostly through training for practitioners and partner sites, but particularly as a convener and thought partner to help connect partnerships and move the work forward. To model this collaborative approach, our partner states are going to introduce each other and begin our discourse with a question. But first, I'm going to share a bit about Utah's creative agent work as they cannot be here today. So, for Utah's Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging project, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums engaged Lifetime Arts to offer a series of professional development courses for cultural institution staff members and professional artists. Following that, cultural organizations received funding to host events, which included a partnership with the Utah Commission on Aging to ensure creative aging programs are present in senior centers across the state. In addition, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums supported the annual Creative Aging Conference that was hosted in St. George, Utah in the fall of 2021. As creative aging continues to flourish in Utah, in this new initiative, the Utah Division of Arts and Museums is looking to continue to strengthen their partnerships, including with the Utah Commission on Aging's Utah Creative Aging Coalition, to reconvene with previous partners and to train more practitioners and cultural institutions. All right. So now I'd like to invite Josh up to the mic now.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, I've got the sort of privilege of kicking us off here. I'm going to introduce my colleague from Idaho, Laura Rogar, and we'll get to hear just a little bit about the work she's been doing in Idaho in the creative aging field. So Laura Rogar is the Arts Learning Services Director for the Idaho Commission on the Arts, where she works to increase access to artist-led learning for Idahoans of every age. In 2022, with their Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging grant, the Idaho Commission on the Arts partnered with the Idaho Division of Veterans Services to provide creative aging services for Idaho's senior veterans. Through collaboration and exploration between those two agencies, the Arts Commission piloted creative aging programs for veterans at 3 Idaho state veterans homes in Boise, Lewiston, and Pocatello. And this partnership combined Idaho Commission on the Arts content expertise with the Veterans Services knowledge of the audience and setting to bring responsive programs to older veterans during a time of heavy COVID restrictions and isolation. And this partnership also opened up dialogue between those two communities to serve a common constituency and to improve the lives of older adults. Now that conversation is being expanded to bring in another state agency, which is the Idaho Commission for Libraries. And the Arts Commission is hoping that through this initiative and the expansion of their cross-sector partnerships, they'll be able to continue to gather information and analyze interest to sustain the work and continue to act as a model for other states. And so my question for Laura is, what specifically did you learn about partnering with Veterans Services that you're going to be able to apply to your new partnership with the state library system.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks for that nice introduction. We learned so much through NASA's leveraging investment in states for creative aging initiative. Just a bit of background about that. My former boss, who was the now retired executive director of our agency, his name is Michael Faison, was the real trailblazer to reach out to the Idaho Division of Veterans Services, which is another state agency, and say, hey, we have a lot of artists who teach, and you guys have veterans homes where there are lots of residents. Could we connect? It was a really new idea. I don't think that our agency had ever partnered with another state agency to provide artist-led learning. And that LISCA grant from NASA made it happen, like was sort of the spark that ignited us. We used part of those funds to train Idaho teaching artists in the creative aging model, and I think that was really successful. We also used part of those funds to train staff and administrators, both in our agency and at the veterans homes. And Lifetime Arts facilitated all of that training and were a really wonderful, valuable partner to us. So my first learning that I'm now taking into our new partnership with another state agency, the Idaho Commission for Libraries, is I'm moving more quickly from the administrative conversation level to the direct service level. I think in our partnership with veterans, we got a little stuck with like all of the administrators talking to each other about how great creative aging would be. And while there is an important like advocacy element to this work, making sure people understand the creative aging model, we really started cooking when I got in contact with the activities directors in the veterans homes. Those are the folks who serve older adults on a day-to-day basis. They really understand their needs in their bones, and they were excited to begin programming. So now with libraries, as soon as I accessed the right person at Idaho Commission for Libraries, who in our case, her name's Dina Brown. She is the Adult Services Director. I just really pushed for Dina to get me in front of librarians. Librarians were hungry to learn about this model. They are very concerned about issues that affect older adults, and we could seed those residencies right away. So that would be my first learning for you. Just kind of get it out of the administrative level as soon as you can. The second learning is to always be impact forward or impact first when you're having conversations about creative aging. That is true at the policy advocacy level, and it's also true when you are just talking to an artist and a site host in the home. There's real alignment and shared goals in what we're looking to do in serving older adults. And so finding that impact language and always centering that in our work has been really important. The last one I have is water your seeds. So Nathan talked about how the seed pilot model can be really effective for building advocacy for creative aging and just having like proof of concept with residencies happening in your state. But I will say, as arts administrators, sometimes it's enough to just make a connection with an artist and a site host, extend a contract, and then just wait for that final report. But I've really found for this creative aging work, it's required of me all of my best practices as a teaching artist, as an educator, and as an administrator. So site hosts need help with program design. They need me checking in on like the shape of a lesson even at that level. And they need a lot of examples of best practices and a lot of encouragement, right? A lot of times I'm just saying, that sounds actually great to me. Here's the wonderful learning I'm seeing, and keep going. So it's been a lot more high touch to do the seed residency model, but I think it's bearing fruit. I really leaned on that metaphor. So there's my learning, and it's now my total pleasure to introduce my peer, Monica Grable. So Monica Grable serves as Arts Education Director for the Montana Arts Council. In her role at MAC, she's responsible for program design, partnership cultivation, and policy making designed to address and advance arts education needs in the state. So far, Montana has engaged in the Leveraging State Investments in Creative Aging project, which consisted of a multifaceted approach toward plan development focused on training and support services for those in Montana who will ultimately carry out the work of creative aging programs. The project began with an initial learning opportunity from Lifetime Arts designed to create context for this work, and with conducting a scan of the creative aging landscape in Montana. Next, Montana Arts Council brought together a community of practice from within state government, from tribal colleges, statewide service organizations, the state's network of nonprofits, teaching artists, organizational leaders, and those who would be served by the programming. The arc of the project allowed for deep and diverse engagement in creative aging work. This brought the topic of creative aging to the forefront of conversations about arts granting and programming in Montana, inviting change and empowering project participants as ambassadors. Now, the Montana Arts Council is partnering with the Montana State Library to implement programs to serve older adults in Montana. They hope to further demonstrate the efficacy and transformational power of creative aging programs. So my question to launch you, Monica, is where are you seeing a strong alignment between Montana Arts Council's goals for creative aging and goals that the Montana State Library holds?
Thank you so much, Laura. And it was so great to hear about all of your work as well. Thanks for the introduction. As you heard Laura say, in terms of our past work in this field, partnership development was a big part of it. What we learned during that time is that one of the most natural of those partners for us is to work with the Montana State Library. We share some obvious goals of reaching Montanans of every age and ability across the state. And we share that very important goal of education and providing professional development experiences to those we serve. So those were some, sort of real baseline initial things that we shared in common. We especially wanted to support the work in a way that brought the opportunities to those we serve where they are. You may have heard Montana is a giant state, although we pride ourselves on this kind of idea that we are a very long state with one long main street, meaning that we're very collaborative by nature. There's a lot of sharing that goes on across the state. And yet there are some challenges with that, obviously. There are rural states and then there are rural states. And Montana is a state whose rural nature really varies. So one of the things we first came to learn is that the Montana State Libraries are very much a central connector in the tiniest of Montana towns. So in some Montana small towns, the library, maybe in addition to the post office, is about the only thing that exists in that town, hopefully a school, but even with consolidation, sometimes those schools are no longer present. The library may also serve as the post office, one and the same. They are so small. So, but obviously those who live there really need access to programs to enrich their lives, and having that happen where they are, using the facilities that state libraries are connected to, is a really, really great place to start. So similar to your work, Laura, we soon found that they have the mainstay sort of venue and central hub in the community, and a desire to extend their programming beyond the literary. Many libraries, I'm sure this is true nationwide, but it's especially true in Montana. Many libraries serve as programming locations for many, many things, community meetings, and other educational opportunities. So The fact that we have connections to artists, something that we are currently building more and more through our teaching artist community of practice, we're able to help pair teaching artists with those library locations that want to provide opportunities in the creative aging field. So, often those libraries have very strong connections in that they know everyone, all the stakeholders in the small town. If there is not an arts organization there, we have sometimes found that we lack those connections in that community. So we really rely on the Montana State Library to help us with those connections. So, sharing that very strong goal of wanting to provide educational opportunity to the smallest of towns, that really is at the heart of our partnership so far. And I should say that we are in the midst of it now, beginning to pair teaching artists with the library locations across the state. So, and that's something that we hope to continue. So, I think that about covers it to answer your question. Thank you again, Laura. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Tony Manfredi. Tony is the Executive Director of the Nevada Arts Council. His professional background combines 30 years of strategic planning, management, marketing, creative, and fundraising services for both local to Nevada and international businesses and organizations. In their leveraging state investments in creative aging project, the Nevada Arts Council contracted with Lifetime Arts to present training in developing and implementing in-person and online creative aging programs for libraries in Nevada and for teaching artists in all 17 Nevada counties. The training was supported by post-training coaching, networking, technical support, and $126,000 in grant funding. Through that initiative, the Nevada Arts Council partnered with teaching artists and county library systems and seeded 42 new creative aging programs in 86 locations throughout the state. The Nevada Arts Council is now working to build a new relationship with the Health and Human Services, Aging and Disability Services Division by implementing 5 seed programs at Nevada senior centers. So, Tony, my question for you is, how do we collectively make the case to legislators for creative aging and get it on the docket?
Well, thanks, Monica. I appreciate the question. Hello, everyone. I'm glad you are here joining us to highlight all of this really great work that's happening around creative aging. Monica, your question's really critical in how we raise awareness and the impact of this work and develop more interest, and I think financial buy-in from our state community and public officials. What we have been focusing on this is really an awareness campaign to present stories of impact to our governor and legislators and work to find collaboration among other state agencies who serve older adults. And it's interesting, and you've heard already today, that state agencies don't always work together. And this is not unique to any one state. It's, I think, nationwide. Oftentimes we kind of get caught up in our specific work, and there's so many great opportunities within other state agencies where we can leverage what each of us do really well. And so we're excited to see how that plays out. That awareness campaign is to present stories of impact, as I mentioned, and we've had some success in that work in our most recent legislative session. I was able to feature our creative aging work that we have that we worked on, as Monica just described to you, to describe the success stories during some of my budget hearings. I shared data points about those 86 locations. We served 602 people. We engaged with over 40 of our teaching artists in this brand new, unique program, all during the pandemic, by the way. We had over 240 hours of teaching artist training, 282 hours to administrators for training, and provided information to our legislators on how the program provided 120 hours of adult learning. I also shared some stories of the heart, this particular testimonial. In the words of one of our workshop participants, it's such a joy to focus on something of value and pleasure while learning a new instrument in lifetime art is important and has its own merits. The social interaction and connection that occurred with older adults in our workshop cannot be overlooked. One of our participants' kids and their grandbaby drove 5 hours to see the culminating event. That's not unique among our states, by the way, our rural communities. 2 of our ladies in the class would tell their friend who was on hospice all about what they learned when they would go see her after each lesson. Their friend passed away the week before the culminating event, and at our participants' request, we dedicated the final concert to her memory. So again, real impactful stories, excuse me, some really impressive data points for an engagement of about $159,000 that we were able to put together from our granting opportunities through the program and then our own funding that we had. I did have a legislator reach out to me during session pushing to change some of our Nevada revised statute language to include arts healing. This move did occur, but it hasn't yet led to any increase in our funding or appropriation, but it is a great beginning. And the real opportunity lies before us. We need more state and partner funding to put towards the program. Our governor and legislators are they're really looking for opportunities to provide a broader and more comprehensive impact of the way we're using state funds. And the more we can partner and leverage our collective funding, the broader and better the collective impact of this creative aging program will be. We're really excited about working more with aging and disability services, finding some really great connections there. We're working with some senior service centers as well and seeing some great gains in the program in that way too. But this will really help this new initiative grow awareness and impact of how the arts are truly integrated into health and healing. And getting that message across to our legislators is so important in terms of this work, how the arts are integrated into so many different things that so many of the different challenges that we're all facing. So really excited about how we're moving forward. To continue as we move forward in this session, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Josh Chrysler. He is the folklorist and health and wellness specialist for the Wyoming Arts Council, a state agency that provides leadership and invests resources to champion, sustain, and cultivate community through the arts across Wyoming. He manages the health and wellness in the arts program, seeking to serve artists and arts organizations working at the intersection of arts and well-being, including the Creative Aging program. Here is a snapshot of what the Wyoming Arts Council's creative aging activities included. From 2020 to today, in both the leveraging state investments in creative aging and the state's leading creative aging initiative, the Wyoming Arts Council, in addition to the artists and libraries they've already worked with, expanded their creative aging program to involve nonprofit arts organizations. Coupled with training from Lifetime Arts, the Wyoming Arts Council will hold a competitive re-grant program that allows the participating nonprofits and individual teaching artists to support creative aging programming. Funds are used for the program grants to continue or develop partnerships with the aging community in their region. In addition, the Wyoming Arts Council has been partnering with the Wyoming State Library to roll out creative aging programs to county libraries across the state. As creative aging begins to take hold in Wyoming in these various sectors, Wyoming now hopes to leverage the existing work to attract new funders and sectors. And so, Josh, my question for you, what is it about your partnership with the state library that has fostered success in your state? And a quick follow-up to that, how has that helped gain interest from other key players, namely the Department of Health?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks for the introduction and the question. It's really energizing to hear all the good work that's going on in our region with creative aging. Answer to the question, it's really, similar to a lot of what we already heard about from Monica in Montana, the importance of libraries there. It's something that we've really found to be true in Wyoming also. like Montana and actually all of the states on our panel, Wyoming is a very rural state. We have the lowest population out of any state in the country, and then we're a large state geographically also. So we have low population and then small communities with really big distances between the communities. And sort of a defining feature of what living in Wyoming is like. I think sort of because of that, I would say in general we have fewer formal arts nonprofit 501c3s in our state than a lot of other states have. And there are some communities, we have some counties in eastern Wyoming, they have 3,000 or 4,000 people in the entire county. They might not have a single arts 501c3 in the entire county. And so sometimes, with the great rurality and distance between places, it can be a challenge to provide arts programming to some of those communities. But most of those counties will have, most of those communities, all of the counties will have libraries, and many small communities in those counties have a branch of the county library also, that, just like Monica was saying, they already serve as community hubs. They already serve as cultural centers. People are accustomed to going to their library branch for, it might be their polling place during elections. Any time that there is cultural activity, a lot of times it's coming from the library, and so people are already used to going there. And so we found that partnering with the state library system has been a huge benefit for us to be able to reach folks who we might not reach if we were focusing solely on partnering with arts organizations, which we do partner with the arts organizations a lot for creative aging as well, but the libraries really help us fill some of those gaps around the state in an important way. And we've had really strong success with that too. And that sort of leads me into the second part of the question about how our creative aging partnership with the state library, how that is sort of helping us move towards a new partnership with our state Department of Health, which I had been sort of trying to partner with the Department of Health Aging Division for a while, and was sort of struggling, didn't necessarily have a ton of success. But now, after a couple of years of partnering with the state library, we sort of have this body of work that I was able to take to them and show them, look at the success we've had partnering with the libraries, look at these numbers of how many older adults we've reached, look at all this anecdotal evidence that we've gathered. Lifetime Arts put together a really nice report from an outside evaluator about our partnership with the state library that includes a lot of really good quotes from participants in the programming that really shows the value of the work we're doing. And then it just sort of happened that at the same time the Department of Health's Aging Division released a new state plan on aging, and they identified looking for community-based solutions to aging as one of their key priorities over the next 4 or 5 years. And so I think we were able to sort of show the way that that's exactly what creative aging is. It's these community-based approaches to aging that have very successful outcomes so far. And so we were able to actually apply for and we received this year a $100,000 grant from the Department of Health's Aging Division to develop more creative aging programs across Wyoming. And so we're doing that now. We just awarded all of that money out to our grantees. They're developing the programs now. And my hope is that we'll be able to use this funding we received from them as sort of a stepping stone to a more long-lasting partnership with the Department of Health. And so that's sort of where I'm trying to take this next is the funds is really helpful and helps us, do all this. How can we sort of transform that into a more permanent partnership with the Department of Health?
Great. Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you everyone else. Let's bring everybody up and we will start just a panel conversation. So I'm going to start with some pretty big questions, some, pretty broad questions, but I'm wondering for each of you, what is maybe the one thing you're wrestling with, but then also what have you figured out? Like, what have you locked in? Anybody chopping it? Laura, do you want to respond to that one first?
Sure. It's a big say to say I've locked something in, but I feel pretty confident having now seeded 10 residencies in site hosts who never presented arts programming before, that I can share with them their basic have to do's and support them through launching a creative aging program. And just 2 years ago I wouldn't have been able to say so the seed pilot model has really helped our agency build that skill set too. What's on my mind is, an item not in my job description, which is to really skill up as a creative aging influencer in my state. So I know in our agency, we don't have a specific item for supporting creative aging in our strategic plan currently. And so big ups to Lifetime Arts for giving us an excuse really to explore the programming and resources to do so. That's been amazing. And, looking forward to conversations with our authorizing environment, I need to be able to really share, again, impact first, what creative aging can do for our population.
Awesome. Thank you.
I can share a little bit more to that question. And for me, the question all along has been, how do we find sustainability for the creative aging programming? Because, we've been going the last few years sort of from grant opportunity to grant opportunity. And, huge thanks to NASA and E.A. Michelson and Lifetime Arts and everybody else that we've worked with to sort of have these opportunities that we've had. But how do we go from that sort of tenuous grant funded programming to something a little more stable and long lasting? And I don't know that I really have an answer to that, but I feel like we're getting closer as we're sort of bringing in more of these partners. We have, buy-in from the state library, buy-in from, all the community organizations that are running the programs. And now we're working on this partnership with the Department of Health. So that's been the big question for me, and sort of figuring out how to get there.
Thank you, Josh. Monica?
Yes, I think for one, I'm in a little bit, we in Montana are in a little bit different circumstance than my colleagues at Idaho and Nevada and Wyoming, in that we are early to seed programs. We've done a lot of study, partnership building, et cetera, and now we're putting the work into practice, which is super exciting. So I would first say, to barely answer the have I figured out, is that partnerships are key. It takes everybody to do this work, and certainly at the beginning of that, without NASA's support and without the support of Lifetime Arts, I'm not sure where we would be. So I'm very anxious to get to the point of documenting our seed programs, because like Josh said, once you have that, once you can demonstrate the work and the outcomes of the work, then it naturally flows into that being a part of the storytelling and a part of the partnership building. So that's the little bit I've learned so far. But on a really rudimentary level, what I'm wrestling with now, that you would think this would have occurred to me before, but one of the things that we all know in terms of best practice within creative aging work is that continuity of program is really important. And we are very much accustomed, or at least I am at the Montana Arts Council, of helping connect sponsors with a visiting teaching artist, and grappling with the geography of it all, getting enough in the budget so that we can send that teaching artist to a place for a day or two, or if they're real lucky, maybe a whole week. In the case of creative aging programs, which have a best practice of continuity of maybe once a week over 6 or 8 weeks, the newest problem that I'm wrestling with is finding adequate teaching artists to pair with our state libraries, many of whom are not living in that community. So not just sending them there one time, but maybe sending them 6 or 7 or 8 times, and planning for that travel and that artist's time. So those are my lessons learned to date. That's something I'm wrestling with for sure.
Thanks, Monica. Tony, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
I think echoing so many of the comments that were previously stated, and adding just, really understanding the value of the creative aging program, and why we need to continue it, and how important it is to help the residents of Nevada. The real challenge, as I see it, one, I think we've said a lot here, is sustaining the program, continuing to fund it more aggressively, providing more impact. I always say, the more we have, the better we can do. And when I say the more we have, it is both funding and staff and support services and partnerships. And I think the biggest challenge that I see ahead of us here in Nevada is building that coalition and partnership cohort, and really bringing this work to light. We're excited to be celebrating and kind of highlighting this work in our upcoming statewide conference. It's going to be a keynote session in our conference. We really want to bring this work out to the field and to the other arts organizations that are in the state, to get them to begin to think about how they're serving older adults. It aligns perfectly with our accessibility work that, as state arts agencies, we are required to, and thankfully are doing. So it's just a perfect fit. And again, I think it highlights how the arts are integrated into so many different things that so many people outside of our respective organizations and our choir here often think about. And this is a really great connecting piece that highlights how we have, how we really do impact our communities in meaningful ways outside of the more traditional ways people see us. So great value in that, but that coalition building is going to be really challenging and really important.
I'm wondering, for all of you, I think we're all aware of the changing demographics, we're an aging population, but we've already sort of noted about how each of your states have unique challenges or opportunities due to either geography or things like that. So I'm wondering if you've talked a little bit about this already, but I'm wondering how partnerships are helping you with things about rural states or unique challenges within your state.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first, sort of just on a really practical level. Partnering with the Wyoming State Library has been really important for us, just in terms of staff capacity. I was really lucky because when we first partnered with the Wyoming State Library, I never had the experience of that, some other folks might experience of you're presenting a model to somebody and trying to get them on board. We sort of just accidentally discovered that the state library was sort of concurrently looking into creative aging at the same time that we were. And so they were completely bought in at the time that we sort of formed this partnership, which was a really big advantage for us. But really just like staff capacity, we're able to sort of share the workload between us and the state library. And a lot of that was because we were both fully on board with the programming and sort of seeing it through. So that definitely helps with, small staff that we have at the Arts Council and everything.
Thank you, Josh.
I could just jump in really quickly and say I echo that in terms of Josh. Our work with the libraries was really important. They are the cultural and community hubs in a lot of our smaller communities in particular, but our larger ones too. And often the folks at the library know the community and those folks really well, and there's built-in trust in that. And so it's a really wonderful partnership and alignment that allows, an easy access into a community that's kind of a ready-made hub. So the libraries were a great partnership for us.
I also want to answer this question in a little bit of a different tack. I think Sonia in the chat asked about like, what's the documentation? What are you doing to demonstrate impact? And I know, Nathan, I keep asking you for support on this too. Like assessment is really top of mind to me, because seeding residencies is wonderful. And right now I have 5 seed residencies in this initiative. So there's a limited number of actual people impacted, but I can really amplify that impact if I do assessment right and then invest in sharing the findings. So we're working to build a university partner that can help with research. Where I'm a little needing to grow is we can assess on arts learning all day, right? But I think when we talk about creative aging, we have arts learning impacts, but we also have social well-being and health impacts that we're wondering about. So I think engaging university partners who are accustomed to studying such things is a really good idea.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry to jump, but this conversation has me thinking a lot about I'm sort of seeing a journey through this. We're talking about like, get out there and seed programs. We also hear this idea of like collecting data and building up stories, and then you add a partner and you have another partner, and then you add another partner, right? But then I'm also thinking about what Josh is saying is that we're going, we're moving this along, but like, where do we get to? Like, how are we getting to that thing where that is now embedded in the state? So I'm going to ask another like really big question of who in your state needs to say yes for this to be embedded. Like where is that barrier for you, and who needs to say yes? And maybe it's not a specific person, but like, where do you see that next domino, so to speak?
I think in Montana, a good next step for us would be working with the veterans organizations as well as the councils on aging. We've made some inroads into some great partnerships already, but this is a little bit related to the last question as well. Like I see this sort of coalition building shares a lot in common with audience building efforts. And, you need to go where the people are. You need to find those organizations that are connected to the potential learners that you're wanting to serve. Many of them are health and social service organizations who, granted, may need some education on why the arts are such a great avenue for serving their constituencies. But those are some key next steps for us that we haven't yet, addressed really.
Thanks, Monica. Anyone else?
I mean, I can jump in again. It's sort of rehashing some of what I've already said, but for me, I really feel like I want to get the Department of Health's aging division sort of on as a full partner. I think that would really go a long ways towards that. I've also been recently speaking with somebody from the university who they have a University Wyoming Center on Aging, and she's pretty interested in the model that we're doing, and so I think that I think it could be a good opportunity to maybe get integrated into some of the research that she's doing, which, because there's lots of great sort of clinical research out there about the programming, of course, like the Dr. Gene Cohen study and everything, but I feel like if there's something that came out of Wyoming specifically, it might have a greater impact on helping for that type of case making. So that's, I don't know if we'll get there or not, but that's somewhere down the road I'd like us to look into.
Thanks, Josh.
I think another dynamic that in our roles we do have the ability to move the needle on is building capacity for teaching artists, identifying more community arts practitioners and naming them as a teaching artist, especially in these rural spaces. Every day a constituent is like, oh, our artist, he's been doing like music for a while, but he's not like famous or anything. And I'm like, that's great. Like that is actually who we want on our team. So really on my mind is like, I have this huge need to ramp my slate of teaching artists up so that if the legislative environment changes and there's a call to scale up creative aging, I'm like, perfect. I have this deep roster of folks who are ready to do the work.
Thanks, Laura.
I can just add one more thought, Nathan. The sessions yesterday, particularly on intergenerational and cogenerational programs, has had me thinking a lot about those we're already looking to serve in our tribal communities, but really thinking about how they can serve as an example. There's already an intentionality around elders in our tribal communities, which is not to say that there are specific cultivated programs. It's very much a part of their culture, but maybe leaning into that a little bit and thinking about how we can learn from that model and apply it to our other partnership buildings and really let them lead as an example for our state.
Thanks, Monica.
And from the standpoint of, the yes folks, it's certainly from our respective funding as our agency, it would be the governor and legislators to approve that funding and potentially personnel and others to help support the program. And that really comes from, our agency being able to tell its story, given the opportunity to tell its story. But certainly hearing that from constituents is also really important. So there's a lot of advocacy and I think educational work of ways that we can really highlight and tell. We can't tell these stories of impact enough to those that hold the purse strings. We need, and it can't just be from the agency side. It really needs to be constituent driven and voter driven.
Thank you. I see that we have a lot of questions that are coming into the chat. So I'd like to invite Susan to hop on. Hey.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan and everybody. Yes, we've got some great questions coming in on the chat, and we're going to get those kind of organized for you. I would like to follow up on a question, though, that is sort of percolating after this discussion in my mind about the difference between program evaluation kind of research or program assessment and the kind of research that's more in the social science realm. Laura, you mentioned, and Josh, you mentioned about why the arts, like what are on our first session in this institute, we heard about kind of how and why are the arts the mechanism of change or the mechanism of providing social connection. So in your points of view as state arts agencies, really in the weeds of doing this work in the environments that you're in, with limited funding that you might have, what do you think is sort of what's the priority for you in terms of the dollars that you would spend? Would you rather spend money on the program evaluation and assessment to collect these real time stories about the impact on people, or would you rather have the kind of overarching reasons why the arts in particular solve this problem for this particular population? Sorry to give like a one or the other, but really curious about what's meaningful for you at this stage of your work.
I'll jump in on this one first, Susan. I think where I sit right now, it almost would be the latter, is to get a little bit more of, to be able to provide some more supportive understanding and reasoning of what the arts really do in this and how they help. At the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do, is help people and help our residents, and that, once we have that additional data and that information, I think that just provides us even more powerful stories.
I see nodding heads around everyone else's. Are you all in agreement with that idea that the sort of data from the scientists are where you would like to see next steps?
Yeah, really advocating for this work, and being able to demonstrate in pretty specific terms what can be gained from engagement in this field for everyone's sake. I think that's going to be really key going forward.
Awesome.
I think so too. I've had good conversations with my executive director, Laura Curry, around who is the object of our advocacy. And we kind of have come to, for our state agency, it's not really like the participants who actually receive services. Where we want to share knowledge is really with these site hosts, cultural institutions, libraries, area centers on aging, so that they can then, implement creative aging programs. And so when we look at assessment, it may not be as much about asking somebody who took, an improv class, like how has it improved for you, but asking the site hosts, like, were you ready to serve this population? Did this model allow you to serve them in a new way? If so, what was the change that you saw? It seems like that will do more for us for advocating in the future.
Thank you so much. I note Heather's comment, Heather Eichmeyer, in the chat, just noting that there is a lot of research out there already on arts and social impact, and that it sounds like there's more support needed in locating it and packaging it, to your point about advocacy and sort of the marketing of that, so that we raise the visibility of the impact. Thank you for that. So turning to some questions that we see coming in from the audience, I want to note that, Josh, folks were interested in what you mentioned about the report that I think Lifetime Arts helped prepare, that you were able to share with the Department of Health. And folks would be interested in seeing that if it's available, but maybe you could share a little bit about what was in that you found really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So Lifetime Arts hired an outside evaluator who sort of came and did site visits at a bunch of the different libraries that were hosting creative aging programs. And he talked to the administrators at the libraries, the librarians. I think he talked to select participants, and then he talked to sort of us at the administrative level at the Arts Council and the library also. And so he gathered all of that type of I guess sort of qualitative information and sort of collated that together, then combined it with all the quantitative material that all the libraries reported back to Lifetime Arts. So it's sort of both of those combined together with the numbers and just sort of, anecdotes about from participants and from librarians about the impact that the programming had in their lives was, I think it was really beneficial. And so sort of to go back to your question, Susan, like I agree that I'd like that more sort of social sciences research, but like this type of evaluation has been really important for us also. Especially like I saw somebody in the chat asking about like documentary type things, and we put together a few short 3 or 4 minute videos that sort of highlight the work of some of our grantees, and those have been really useful as well, especially on the level of sharing with like potential ground level partners like additional libraries or something. Like, look how powerful this has been for the community members over here. So I think both are important, but yeah, the report that Lifetime Arts put together with that evaluator was quite useful as well.
Susan and Josh, I also wanted to add a point, Josh, what you made is, in addition to the impact that this work is having on older adults, I think it's really interesting that the report also is demonstrating the impact that this has on people who are implementing the work itself. It's transforming, people's view on aging. It's connecting them to their constituency in a way that they previously hadn't have happened. So I think also that human sort of centeredness impact of the work has been, I think, another really great thing that these reports sort of bore out. Oh, Susan, you're muted.
Totally amateur hour around here. Another question that was important that came in on our chat is about working with tribes. And in particular, if you're on tribal lands or reservations, are you also working with their libraries? This participant noted that the Akwesasne Library is a combined library and cultural center. So how in the mix of libraries and communities are you factoring in tribal communities?
For our part in Montana, one of our seed programs that has yet to occur is slated to take place at one of our tribal libraries. So it's a start.
In Nevada, we want to put some focus on this as well. What we have been learning is so many of the elders of a lot of our tribal nations have died during the time frame around the pandemic, and certainly how important tribal elders are to sustaining stories and culture and heritage in that. And we see real opportunity and be able to bring this work into that area too. So it's a discussion that we are having for sure.
Thank you. Josh, Laura, you want to chime in?
I could just say that, yeah, I think it's an important question. I wish Brian Green from the Wyoming State Library was here to verify this, but I'm not 100% sure that either of the tribes in Wyoming have a tribal run library. We have county libraries that are in the county that the reservation is, and we've been working with the library in that county, but I don't know if either of the tribes have their own actually tribally run libraries or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then just from Idaho Commission on the Arts standpoint, we have not served we have not meaningfully served any tribal organization with creative aging programming, and it's definitely on our minds and definitely part just of a larger agency conversation we need to have. I think we aren't alone among state arts agencies that you really rely on your long-term arts organizations to deliver services, and it may not be enough. And so, doing outreach is really important, and using the creative model, aging model to do that, it can be, I think, effective.
Well, thanks for those responses. Moving on to another question that came in. This is for first Josh, but then generally to everyone. Josh, have you been able to include folk and traditional artists as teaching artists in your creative aging program? And then generally, another kind of related question was about what qualifies as a teaching artist. And that can be a huge conversation. So maybe just to focus it, if folks want to chime in on what would you qualify as a teaching artist in this realm of creative aging? What are you looking for? How to support them, et cetera?
Yeah, both good questions. I would say I have not had a ton of success incorporating folk and traditional artists into my creative aging program so far. We've had a few programs that are sort of folk and traditional arts adjacent, like storytelling, and we have a woodworking one coming up that I'm excited about. But I would say so far we've had slightly less success sort of in that area. And of course, I also run our folk and traditional arts program, so I feel like it's sort of on me to make those connections, but just hasn't really necessarily happened well at this time. The second question, who qualifies as a teaching artist? We're really open to anybody who's interested. We don't have any sort of restriction on who is able to be hired for these programs. We've offered training in creative aging programming through Lifetime Arts, and we're actually getting ready to do that again in January. And so I do a lot of outreach to potential participants through there to get training to them, and I'll be doing outreach to some of the folk and traditional artists I work with there as well. But we don't require that folks who receive grants from us hire artists who've gone through the training. We just offer the training as a way to sort of build up a cohort of people who've received the training. It's not a requirement. Really, our main requirements are that there's somebody who has a skill in an art form, and they're willing to take the time over the course of weeks to pass that knowledge on to the aging community. That's really pretty much the only guidelines we have there.
I am thinking about this a lot as I redesign our teaching artist roster. I notice we have a legacy of really biasing a certain kind of university accolade or, institutional teaching experience in our long-term roster. And when I have conversations in community, I find really good folks who would slip through the cracks. So as an example, we're in the second year of having artists work in each of the Idaho State Veterans Homes, and there are now 4 of them. And in Lewiston, Idaho, which is an agricultural area, their community has decided to learn leather tooling. So I found a saddlery that's run by a husband and wife, the Ensleys. Clay builds saddles and Shelley does the tooling. And it's such a great culturally responsive program to bring to this Lewiston Veterans Home. Most of the men there worked in agriculture after their military service. We're outdoorsy guys, would be interested in learning leather tooling. the Ensleys initially said, well, we're not educators. And after conversation, they said, well, we do always have like the 4-H workshops, come to the saddlery for a 4-week experience. And I'd be like, that's the one, that's what you're already knowing how to do. So I do see something that we can do is find those folks in community and, you know, offer them the label of teaching artist or of community artist, to see it, you know, if they can try it on and how that feels and could fit into their life.
Thank you so much, Laura. Tony or Monica, if you want to chime in, feel free. We have a couple more questions on the docket here too.
I was just going to add that also in our agency, we've had a folklorist on staff, and some emphasis on folk and traditional arts of late. When we started into this work, I kept saying, hey, everybody, there are going to be a lot of intersections with this work, and seeing that alignment with what's happening on the folk and traditional side of our agency, I very much hope will have implications for you know, bringing some new teaching artists into our roster, at the least. Maybe some other partnerships as well, but a mentorship program is forming.
Cool.
Just to chime in, we actually do have folk arts artists on our teaching artist roster. It's nicely integrated in that way. Our folklorist, state folklorist at the time when we did our initial grant, was a part of the grant writing process, along with Mary Jane Dorofechuk from our arts learning program area. And I actually was able to attend a course that was put on by his artist in Vegas. His name is Harold Akampong, and it was on African drumming. And it was a phenomenal class. It was a number of classes, and I was at the last class. He actually got me a drum, and I got involved in the teaching as well. And the class itself is classic from a testimonial standpoint. If you look at the results, I had those who were taking part in it come up to me afterwards, giving me specific examples of the impact and how important it was for them. Many of them, this was at a senior center in Las Vegas, and many of them had just recently moved to Las Vegas just before the pandemic hit. So they had no social, had no social connections at all. And this really created that social bond with them. And it was through something really unique in terms of the African drumming experience that they were able to learn. So it was really cool.
You guys are giving such inspiring and interesting examples of like the actual work. So thank you for sharing that too. It's we can talk about it sometimes so much at these high levels, and then when you hear about what's happening on the ground, it brings it all together. Here's a question about the rurality sort of factor in Western states. How are you all approaching sequential learning experiences in highly remote settings? We do know that good creative aging practice is founded on the idea that we want to deliver sequential skills-based, not always just one-off, like the more we can build with the same group of people, the better. How do you find that's working, or how are you approaching that? Maybe it's looking different, and that's open question.
I would say in Montana, we're still trying to answer this. You know, we've had requests for shorter term kinds of models. And in the seed programs that we're receiving support for currently through this Western States Initiative, we are trying to keep to the sequential learning model. But as I mentioned earlier, it is a bit challenging in that some of the teaching artists that would be the best paired with that location in terms of what they're wanting to achieve do not live in that community necessarily. So it's the case that we're just looking continually for teaching artists who are closer to the site.
Very practical, Monica. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to like what Monica said, and also add there has been some trepidation for our rural library partners about this issue. you know, 8 times, like expecting a patron to show up 8 times in this rural area. And a lot of them have had really clever solutions. And so it has included adding transportation. So having engaging residential facilities who have transportation and then asking them to put it on their regular calendar as programming. But it has also included thinking about how to serve offsite, right? So is there a place where lots of folks they would like to serve live, and should they move the programming to them? So I'm excited to see how they resolve the question. I think it's a good one. But I also think kind of my idea about loosening up who we consider a teaching artist a little bit is relevant to this conversation about serving rural.
We've had libraries have sort of interesting response to this. We have a county in Wyoming, Lincoln County, that's over far west side of the state, and it's sort of shaped like a lawn skinny county. And so the county seat is in the southern part of the county, but they have library branches elsewhere. And so what they've been doing is actually having a teaching artist go to one of the branches, whatever branch works for them, teaching out of there. But then they've also set up basically like a Zoom call in where folks will gather at one of the other branches of the library that might be 2 or 3 hours away, still in the same county, and zooming in. So you have 2 separate physical gatherings of participants, one teaching artist who's in one physical location, but sort of sharing virtually. And they've had some actually pretty good success with that.
Great. Friends, we are just about ready to bring our session to a close for our intermission at 1:30. I do have one last question. I'm sorry, I see there are some really good ones in the audience chat that keep coming in. Let me just say, Evan Johnson, your question is super relevant for our next session that will happen in the latter part of our afternoon. So come back for that final session, and hopefully your question will be unpacked there. And I also want to note, Dee Denton, your comment, if you attend the next session, you'll learn a lot there too. And also I can share some information about teaching artists fees in a sort of separate way that might be helpful for you as well if you want to just chat me directly. My final question is actually for maybe Nathan and everybody, but Nathan to start with. And that is, why Western states? We've heard a lot about the similarities about, the geography and sort of the specific needs. I'm really curious about the potential for the regional approach to supporting creative aging, not just in the West, but in all across the US. Like what's gained by cohorting state arts agencies into a regional opportunity, and why did the West kind of come about as the first swing at that idea?
I think there's a couple things in there, and I think one of those is building upon like the specific successes that you all have had in creative aging, and again, that's also in successes of your partnerships, which have also allowed you to reach, your states in a way that's really meaningful. So I find that has been just a really great model to explore and look at more, in how that pertains to sort of place, and things like that.
Makes sense. I'm just super curious about the way that we are sharing what we're learning and making it really as relevant and actionable as we can. And it just makes sense to bring, especially in the West, together for these learnings. Okay, we're right at intermission. You all are so great. Thank you for sharing everything that you've shared with the audience today. Continued good luck with the projects. I know you're just at the beginning in a lot of ways of getting going. So Nathan, thank you for repping Lifetime Arts. And to our audience, we're going to close Zoom And we're going to see you back on this exact same Zoom link in 15 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again.